to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm your host, Amanda Lamb. In today's deep dive conversation with WRAL Hidden History reporter Heather Leah, we're talking about a hidden miniature redwood forest in the heart of downtown Cary. Now, it's the last place you would expect to find a little redwood forest, but it's there, tucked away behind Town Hall, with its fluted trunks and rippling roots, a vision of red against a striking hillside curtained with green ivy. Heather, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So this sounds fascinating. And when I think of redwood trees, and I think most people who think of redwood trees, we think about them along the West Coast. Yep. So tell me a little bit about these trees and how they compare with some redwood trees that are found in North Carolina.
Yeah, so first of all, I was completely surprised to find this little redwood forest myself. A friend of mine posted a picture, and I was like, where is that? And he said it's right behind Town Hall. I've driven past it a million times and not even noticed it. So it's kind of a little piece of magic once you know it's there. So yeah, redwoods can be absolutely huge. There's 3 types of redwood trees. Now, I'm not a tree expert, so this is from my research. But there are dawn redwoods, coast redwoods, and then the great sequoias, right? And dawn redwoods, they tend to be a little bit smaller. They're still huge, but they tend to be a little smaller. And they have these beautiful fluted bottoms. It almost looks like they're wearing a skirt. And they have these just rippling root systems that kind of come out over the ground. Now, the coast redwoods and the great sequoias, those are the really big ones. If you're out there on the coast of California, they can reach over 300 feet tall. They can have a 30-foot diameter, where you've maybe seen pictures of a car driving through the middle of a redwood tree. When I went through the redwood forest several years ago, we actually had to turn our headlights on because the trees are so tall, they blot the sun out. And so even in the middle of the day, your headlights have to be on. And they can live thousands of years. So the ones here in North Carolina aren't as old as the ones on the coast of California. But to give you a comparison of some more native North Carolina trees, a live oak reaches about 40 to 80 feet, right? Compared to 300 feet for one of these trees, right? We're talking these trees are
massive.
Massive. A white oak can reach about 100 feet. Still, we're talking 3 times less than a big great sequoia. So when you see a redwood in North Carolina, it absolutely towers over the other trees in the area. It's very shocking to see them. They really stand out.
But they're not as big as the ones you're talking about in California.
No, they first of all, they're younger here. The oldest redwood that I know about in North Carolina is about 80 years old. So it's still kind of a baby if you think they could reach 2,000 years old. 80 is not very old.
No, absolutely not.
So they're not quite as big. They still do tower over the trees we have here in North Carolina natively, though. So now the dawn redwoods, that's the ones in downtown Cary. But there are other coast redwoods. Those are a lot bigger. There's a couple in downtown Raleigh in a yard. Again, they just you drive through the neighborhood and they just tower over every other tree.
Yeah, it's not something you expect.
No.
Absolutely not. Well, we're going to come back in a moment after the break and talk more with Heather Leah about where you can find redwoods in Cary and how did they get to the Triangle. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm talking with WRAL's Heather Leah about how redwood trees that we typically think of being found in California ended up in the Triangle and also here in Cary. First of all, let's look at the big picture, Heather. How did these trees end up in the Triangle?
Well, there's a few different sources. There's a couple of trees that are right behind Hillsborough Street in a gentleman's yard, and the owner told me they were there when he moved in the 80s. He thinks they were probably planted there in the 1940s. Wilson, North Carolina also has at least 10 large redwoods, and again, they're just scattered in yards. The Wilson redwoods were brought there by one man. It's there's a man named Woody Harrison, and he's talked about his grandfather brought those redwoods from a nursery in Norfolk, Virginia, and just, gave them to people back in the 1940s. And so they've grown. Wilson has probably the most redwoods that you'll find in a single area. And then the Dawn redwoods that are in downtown Cary. Now that is probably the single largest grove of redwoods that I've seen in this area, right, other than the forest. And it really looks like a little forest because there's 15 of them all together. Now, they were put there by a company that was just asked to do the landscaping, landscape architects for back in 2000 when Town Hall in Cary was kind of being expanded. It looked a lot different before its expansion. They added these redwoods there, and they were, of course, a lot smaller at the time.
Thought they would be a nice addition to the landscaping.
Right.
And obviously they are. So, what's interesting is always interesting about your reports, Heather, is there are things that we just don't see. We drive right by them all the time. And there may even be people who work right there at the town hall in Cary and don't see these. So tell me, if somebody wants to see them, where should they go?
All right, so depends on if you want to see the Dawn Redwood Forest, which is the one that's by Town Hall. That one is right between Town Hall and Herb Young Community Center. So it's just right in between. I've driven past it so many times. There's also a couple of them on Montgomery Street. That's right behind the Snoopies on Hillsborough Street. You can't miss them. If you drive down that street, you'll see them standing there. And then Wilson, I'll tell you at least one of them. This is the biggest one that I've seen. So if you want to see a really big, impressive one, it's on the corner of Raleigh Road Parkway and Sunset Crescent. And pictures of all of these trees and their locations are on WRAL.com. If you search Hidden History, you'll find the story, and that'll help you see what they look like and see what you're going to go look for.
And it sounds like they thrive here. I mean, you would think, well, maybe they're from a different climate, from a different topography, but it sounds like they do well here.
They do. Obviously, they're not as gigantic as on the California coast, but they're quite large and impressive with very thick, massive trunks, and they're huge and tall. And apparently Wilson and the humidity and the soil there, from what I've heard, again, I'm not a tree expert, but from what I've heard, Wilson in particular, for some reason, the soil, I guess, of eastern North Carolina and the humidity makes those trees do very well in Wilson.
So you might be starting a trend. People might say, oh, redwood trees, let's do that.
I would love, someone mentioned to me in a comment the other day, they said, imagine another 100 years from now or 200, 500 years from now, how big these redwoods that are in Raleigh and Cary might actually be. We might have,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if someone wants to read your other reports, where should they look on WRAL.com?
Yep, it's the same. You just go to WRAL.com and you search Hidden History, and all the stories will pop up for you.
Heather, thanks as always. I think every single time I talk to you, I learn something new. So that's always exciting for me.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here today, and thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and making us part of your morning routine. If you like what you're hearing, please rate us on Apple Podcasts or on whatever podcast app you use. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email waiting in your inbox every morning with Triangle news, events, and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.